All right, y'all, welcome to the show. It is on like Donkey Kong today, so we are going to get to, right off the bat here, the New York Times confirming that regime change in Venezuela is the goal of the Trump regime. So we're looking at another colossal, catastrophic war, and nobody's talking about it. I mean, I think we've done more coverage of Venezuela here than anybody in the media anywhere has done, and that's a crime, bro. I'm a YouTuber. Like, this is crazy. So we'll talk about that. We also have the Trump regime caught ordering the illegal arrest over a Democratic mayor for absolutely nothing. That is actually caught on tape. It's wild. We'll also get to a Reagan-appointed judge wrote a scathing rebuke of Trump and came down on him hard in a free speech case. And then also later on, we have Trump is now censoring Black history and banning a very famous slave picture from being in on public property and in museums and things of that nature. So really crazy stuff. And then also, Bill Burr breaks his silence on selling out for Saudi blood money. That's fascinating. We have some other comedians who are now just taking him to the woodshed over his, complete betrayal of his own principles. And Jimmy Fallon, as predicted, has cucked himself to Trump in an embarrassing display after the whole Jimmy Kimmel fiasco. So there's a lot to say about all that stuff. You guys know the drill. Everybody, please do me a big favor and subscribe to the channel. That helps the videos out in the algorithm and spreads them out to as many people as possible. So I deeply appreciate a subscription, a like. You can click that bell icon so you get a notification every single time a video drops. That also helps as well. You could also support the show on Patreon if you're so inclined. Thank you to everybody who does support the show on Patreon. Remember, this is real independent media. I've never talked to an advertiser. I've never done an ad read or anything like that. Never talked to a billionaire. Never taken any sketchy money, man, and I'm very proud of that. We're one of very, very few outlets that can say that. And it honestly puts us in like a rare category, and I'm so thankful that you guys have made that possible. So thanks again for all the support. You could also support Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. You could sign up below for that, and you can subscribe to the Corin's World YouTube channel where we do Kyle and Corin episodes live every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So the New York Times is reporting that it is indeed true. They are planning to do a regime change in Venezuela and take out Maduro. So here's what they say. Top Trump aides push for ousting Maduro from power in Venezuela. An opposition movement whose figures have met with U.S. officials says it is communicating with Washington on plans to dismantle Nicolas Maduro's criminal structure. So in other words, what we're talking about here is the opposition to Maduro in Venezuela is working behind the scenes. This is what this means. With the CIA. Just like in Trump's first term, they tried to do a coup in Venezuela, and they had this guy, Juan Guaido, who they just pretended was the president, even though he's not the president. That's what's happening. So they tried this in the first term. They would have Juan Guaido come to like UN gatherings and shit like that. He'd come to the White House and meet up with Trump. And they just lied and pretended like he was the president. They called him the president. He wasn't. Maduro had one, right? And now they're doing the same shit. They want to do the same shit. They're working with new opposition figures. All right, let's continue. The push by top aides to President Trump to remove Nicolas Maduro as the leader of Venezuela has intensified in recent days, with administration officials discussing a broad campaign that would escalate military pressure to try to force him out, U.S. officials say. It is being led by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. Mr. Rubio argues that Mr. Maduro is an illegitimate leader who oversees the export of drugs to the United States, which he says poses an imminent threat. Now, that's bullshit, legal attempt at a legal justification. By the way, I've seen the numbers. It's something like only like 10% of the illegal drugs that come into the U.S. come from Venezuela. It is an astonishingly low percentage. This is just the cover story. This is the cover story because they want to get rid of him. He's not under the thumb of U.S. corporate forces. They want to topple his government. They want to steal the oil. This is what this really comes down to. Everything else is just noise. They say, in recent weeks, the U.S. military has launched lethal attacks on civilian boats that the administration said were smuggling drugs for Venezuelan gangs. But Mr. Rubio is shaping a more aggressive strategy using intelligence provided by the CIA, the official said. The Pentagon has built up a force of more than 6,500 troops in the region. So let me ask you guys, do you think they're sending 6,500 troops down there for shits and giggles? Do you think it's for some intimidation factor? Or are they about to actually make this thing happen? When Putin did the military buildup on Ukraine's border, Occam's razor was, oh, he's about to invade that shit. That's exactly what we're looking at here. And by the way, 6,500 troops and 10 warships. 10 warships. Also, let's point out, remember, they're using Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, as a docking station. Okay, well, now you put Puerto Rico in danger because you guys are so bloodthirsty and you're so hell-bent on regime change that now even the innocent people of Puerto Rico could end up being in the crosshairs if, Venezuela decides they're going to fight back. The intelligence agency's director, John Ratcliffe, and Stephen Miller, Mr. Trump's chief domestic policy advisor, both support Mr. Rubio's approach, the official said. Oh boy. So Stephen Miller, who's actually really running most of the shit in the government right now, he agrees. Let's do regime change in Venezuela. That's crazy. The U.S. military has been planning potential military operations targeting drug trafficking suspects in Venezuela itself as a next phase, although the White House has not yet approved such a step, current and former officials say. These operations would be aimed at interfering with drug production and trafficking in Venezuela, as well as tightening a vice around Mr. Maduro. By the way, let me just say, shame on the New York Times for just running with the official line and pretending like it's true. It's incumbent on you, New York Times, to lay out that actually very few drugs come from Venezuela. Like, instead of just putting what their narrative is and acting like, well, that's the end of it. Like, you act like you got to do your job. This is not doing your job properly. Because administration officials assert Mr. Maduro sits atop Venezuela's cartel network, they can argue that removing him from power is ultimately a counter-narcotics operation. So this is exactly what we talked about, guys. They want to marry the war on drugs with the war on terror. And they want to say, oh, we already have the legal justification to start a new war in a new country. And so they make up some bullshit about, oh, Venezuela, you have Maduro is at the top of a Venezuelan drug cartel, which, again, completely and utterly made up. Mr. Rubio repeatedly cites the Justice Department's 2020 indictment of him and other Venezuelan officials on drug trafficking charges. He recently described Mr. Maduro as a fugitive from American justice and the head of a terrorist organization, an organized crime organization, that have taken over a country. You know what's funny? I feel like that describes way better MAGA and Trump than it does Maduro. At the same time, two senior figures in Venezuela's opposition say their movement has been planning for what to do if Mr. Maduro falls and have been talking with the Trump administration about that possibility. Oh, so here we go. This is another Ahmed Chalabi situation. You know what that means? Back when they did the war in Iraq, this con man named Ahmed Chalabi convinced the neocons and Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and basically said, like, oh yeah, as soon as Saddam Hussein falls, I'll be able to take control of the country. People fucking love me over there. And they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Then, of course, it was a complete and utter disaster. Everything they did failed. It would be the same fucking thing here. Oh, we'll just have this opposition waltz in and take over the country and everything will be hunky-dory. No, it fucking won't. Trump administration officials have not confirmed whether there have been such exchanges, and the White House did not provide comment on the matter. In July, Mr. Trump signed a still secret order directing the U.S. military to use force against drug cartels his administration has labeled terrorists. The Pentagon began building up a large naval force in the Caribbean. Then came the U.S. military strikes on civilian boats. So on that one, shout out to the New York Times for correctly calling them civilian boats, because that's exactly what they were. Mr. Trump has announced 3 such operations in international waters since September 2nd that have killed at least 17 people without presenting a legal basis for the attacks. He described the first 2 as targeting Venezuelans, but has not given the nationality of the people killed in the 3rd strike. Planning for expanding military operations into Venezuela was reported earlier by NBC News. Mr. Rubio met with 5 opposition figures in May who secretly fled the United States in what he called a precise operation. He has praised the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, whom he called by her nickname, the Venezuelan Iron Lady, in a tribute this year. Jesus Christ. They got nicknames and shit for the people they're trying to illegally install as puppet dictators. This is crazy, bro. By the way, the same guy who brags all the, I stopped 7 wars. Sometimes he ups it. I stopped 8 wars. I stopped 9 wars. That same guy, here we are, yet again, talking about a new war. He already started this war because he's already illegally bombing Venezuelan fishing boats. But the same guy who sucks himself off like he's ending wars, he bombed Iran, he bombed Yemen, he bombed Somalia, he's got plans to bomb Mexico, he wants to take back Panama, wants to take Greenland, and now we're already bombing Venezuela, and they want to do a full regime change in Venezuela. So all that shit he talked about the Iraq war was stupid, we should have never gone in, it was a big fat mistake. All that shit he talked was garbage. He didn't mean a word of it. He was trying to say things he thought were popular to get in power. Then once he's in power, he's George W. Bush himself. He's George W. Bush with a spray tan and a dead meerkat on his head. That's what he is. Pedro Uruchurtu, An advisor to Ms. Machado said in an interview that the opposition had developed a plan for the first 100 hours after Mr. Maduro's ouster that would involve a transfer of power to Edmund Gonzalez, who ran for president against Mr. Maduro last year. Oh, so you lose, and then you go, oh, I'm just going to take it over. I love this. They're gaming out all the specifics of how they're going to illegally take power. Independent monitors have said that the election was marred by fraud, and that Mr. Gonzalez, who has since been exiled in Spain, was its legitimate winner. Oh, please. What we're talking about is an operation to dismantle a criminal structure, and that includes a series of actions and tools, Mr. Uruchurtu said, adding, it has to be done with the use of force, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible to defeat a regime like the one we're facing. By the way, look at how straightforwardly that people discuss violence, political violence being okay and acceptable and morally just when it's some other country. God forbid you say that here about this regime. Imagine somebody saying this about Trump. Imagine some Democrat or liberal or leftist saying, quote, it has to be done with the use of force, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible to defeat a regime like the one we're facing. If you said that about this government, oh my God, they would throw you in the gulag immediately. They would say, how dare you? How dare you? You say it in the context of overthrowing Maduro, and they're like, oh, right on, bro. We love political violence. The opposition's plans include persuading other governments to take diplomatic, financial, intelligence, and law enforcement actions, he said. A second senior member of the largely exiled Venezuelan opposition who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive issue said they were talking to multiple U.S. agencies. Again, admitting, hey man, we're working with the CIA to do another regime change and coup, and we're openly discussing our criminal plot. Imagine for a second, this was an article about Iran secretly working with the government of another country to overthrow them, to put in a government that's more in line with Iran's interests. Imagine it was Russia. Imagine it was China. This would be discussed as like a comic book villain nefarious plan. But when it's us, this is just talked about in like a casual, like, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is how we move forward. And people, like, there's no moral judgment that's added here, even though the moral judgment should be slapping you across the fucking face. The State Department said the administration was focused on fighting drug cartels. Quote, Maduro was not the legitimate leader of Venezuela. He's a fugitive of American justice. How is he a fugitive of American justice if he's not fucking American? Who undermines regional security and poisons Americans. And oh my God. This is a joke? This is a joke. Anyway, you get the gist of it. We don't need to read the rest of it. But this is the New York Times going, oh yeah, the plan is regime change. That's why there's 6,500 troops down there. That's why there's 10 warships down there. We're literally in direct conversation with the opposition leaders. And let's go do another illegal and offensive war against a country that didn't attack us, wasn't going to attack us, had no plans to do so. And we will be in contravention of U.S. law and international law in the process. And we'll just act like it's okay because we're us and we're special. What a sick joke, bro. What a sick joke. No, seriously, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of human rights and justice and a livable future, these people have to be impeached and they have to be criminally tried. They have to. Because now we're at the point, guys, again, I made this point before, but believe me, it's super important. At least back during the George W. Bush horror show, they at least felt the need to do 2 years of a buildup of propaganda to say, hey man, we got to take out Saddam Hussein. He was working with Osama bin Laden. He helped do 9/11. Like, it is what it is. We're not safe. He's got weapons of mass destruction. They had all these arguments to try to scare Americans into going, okay, go to war with Iraq. And that's what happened, right? Now, we are so far gone, they don't even give you the respect of lying to you and doing a propaganda campaign. We're so far gone that they're just like, yeah, we sent 6,500 troops down there. We sent 10 warships down there. We're already illegally bombing innocent civilians on dinghy fishing boats multiple times. And we're going to do a regime change and not even bother to ask Congress and run it through Congress like you're legally required to do. Not even bother to make an argument in the media to explain to your average Americans, hey, here's why we have to spend billions and billions of dollars doing this. No, they just do it. They just fucking do it. Rogue criminal regime behind bars. That's where they all belong. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.